This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, we turn now to the New York Times' dismissal of its top editor, who was the first woman to hold that position in the newspaper's 160-year history. Executive editor Jill Abramson was replaced Wednesday in a surprise move by publisher Arthur Sulzberger Jr., just 2.5 years after her appointment. During her tenure, the Times won 8 Pulitzer Prizes. She's been replaced by managing editor Dean Baquet, who became the first African-American to take up the post. Both Abramson and the Times have signed non-disparagement agreements, and Sulzberger has insisted her firing was due to, quote, an issue with management in the newsroom. Abramson reportedly had complained about earning less pay than her male predecessor, Bill Keller.
The New York Times denied the charge, saying Abramson's total compensation package in 2013 was comparable to that of earlier executive editors. But Ken Aletta of The New Yorker magazine writes, quote, as executive editor, Abramson's starting salary in 2011 was $475,000, compared to Keller's salary that was $559,000. Her salary was raised to $503,000, and only after she protested was raised again to $525,000. She learned that her salary as managing editor, $398,000, was less than that of the male managing editor for news operations, John Geddes. She also learned that her salary as Washington bureau chief from 2000 to 2003 was $100,000 less than that of her successor in that position, Phil Taubman.
The developments drew attention to the pay discrimination women are still widely recognized to face. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid cited them Thursday when he renewed his call to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act, which Republicans blocked a vote on for the 3rd time last month. The bill will prohibit retaliation against employees who share their salary information with each other.
Madam President, this is an issue that is more than just something that takes place away from the madding crowds. Look what happened, it appears, in the New York Times. The woman that ran that newspaper was fired yesterday. Why? It's now in the press because she complained she was doing the same work as men in 2 different jobs and made a lot less money than they did. That's why we needed that legislation.
Well, to discuss the dismissal of the New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson and the status of women in the media, we're joined by Lynn Povich. Povich began her career at Newsweek as a secretary, and in 1975 she became the magazine's first woman senior editor. This came after she joined more than 40 other women staffers in suing Newsweek for hiring women only as researchers and rarely promoting them to reporter or writer. The landmark lawsuit was filed on the same day the magazine ran a cover story on the women's movement with the headline, Women in Revolt. Following the case, women working at Time, the Reader's Digest, the New York Times, NBC, and the Associated Press also sued their employee.
Lynn Povich recounts the story in her book, The Good Girls Revolt, how the women of Newsweek sued their bosses and changed the workplace. Since leaving Newsweek in 1991, she's been editor-in-chief of Working Woman magazine and managing editor, senior executive producer for MSNBC.com. In 2013, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Washington Press Club Foundation, which was founded in 1919 to ensure that women established an equal place in the newsroom. Lynn Povich, we welcome you to Democracy Now!, a fascinating story, your own. But let's first talk about what has happened to Jill Abramson and your assessment of what has taken place.
Well, first of all, Jill was a towering figure and has been for a long time in the journalism business. She's an excellent reporter. She's done tough stories. She's a fabulous investigative reporter. She ran a great Washington bureau of the New York Times. And of course, for those of us in the media, her appointment was significant. That a woman would be able to be the editor of the New York Times was extraordinary. And so this is really a sad and very upsetting ending to her reign. You know, I think the problems with Jill, as we've learned now from the New Yorker piece, is that she has been consistently underpaid in the previous positions that she had as well. It's not clear what the total compensation issue was with Jill, so we're not exactly sure how that did compare. But I think it shows how upset she was that, at least according to Ken Auletta's piece, she actually brought in a lawyer to talk about her her salary and her compensation. And I think what resonates is that women are consistently underpaid in every single field. We know that well, and we know that even at the top. When Mary Barra became CEO of GM, she also was underpaid.
And in terms of her impact in the short period that she was executive editor, could you talk about what happened under her regime there?
Well, she seemed to have, from the outside, enormous success. I mean, she won 8 Pulitzers in the course of her reign. There were some issues where she appointed some people who didn't work out. Fine. There were certainly talks about her personality. There's often people say about women, you know, they're judged on their personality and men are judged on the outcomes. That's also been consistently true when you talk about women, especially in top management. You know, I think it's also a question of managing up. Some people can be difficult, but they manage up well. Other people may have more difficult relationships with their bosses.
I want to go to Jill Abramson's legacy at the New York Times. First, this is a clip of Jill Abramson speaking to CBS News just a few weeks after she was appointed executive editor in 2012.
It would be nice to think we would get to the point where it wasn't so remarkable when a woman rose to the top job at an important institution. But I think, you know, we aren't there yet.
As of this Wednesday, the New York Times masthead no longer lists Jill Abramson as executive editor, but it does list many of the women she appointed during her tenure. In 2013 alone, she made Carolyn Ryan the Washington bureau chief, Allison Mitchell the national editor. She also made Pamela Paul head of the Sunday Book Review. In addition, Abramson created a race and ethnicity beat at the paper, covered by national correspondent Tanzina Vega, and she appointed Margaret Sullivan as public editor, the first woman to hold the position at the paper. It's also worth noting that the New York Times opinion page, which is outside the executive editor's purview, has a 10-to-2 ratio of male to female columnists. Lynn Povich.
Well, it is true, and we know this, that when women run something, they tend to appoint other women. And certainly Jill did that with bringing so many women into the management positions. I just want to say that actually the appointment of Margaret Sullivan is the publisher's appointment. It is not the editor's appointment. So Arthur Sulzberger was responsible for Margaret Sullivan's appointment. But Jill put many, many women in top positions and was a role model for the younger women and all women at the New York Times. And I think we know how upset they are to see the way in which she was dismissed.